Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Happy to be here.
It's only been like 10 minutes since we've talked
Well,
officially.
I feel like I talk to you all day, every day.
That's true. That's true.
You're like my agile
Um,
soul sister.
that's it. Exactly. That's it. Um, so we're going to be doing a podcast. Hopefully, this is our first trial run. Um, and do you want to kind of give an update about who you are, where you've come from, how how you see the world around you,
My
and the work you're doing now?
long journey to get here to this point.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I would say I feel like I've always been an agilist, but I never knew that until maybe about 15 years ago. I started to make peace with the fact that I was this agilist thing and not just a badass business operations leader. And it came from a lot of different places, some from software development world, but some also from managing a warehouse and kind of understanding Kaizen Blitz and Kanban and kind of those methodologies and how lean kind of fits into the agile ways. And the way that I see the world around me most often today, or the thing that I'm most often focusing on today, is how leaders can be better agile leaders from a business perspective.
Hmm. So here's a leading question. What does agile mean to you?
Agile to me, in the most simplest response, means always getting better.
Hmm. So like that continuous improvement mindset.
Continuous improvement ways to deliver value. And that depends on who your audience is. So lots of different varieties, whether your customers are internal to your organization or external to your organization, but it's constantly getting better at delivering value to your fans.
Hmm. It's really funny that you said delivering value. That's something that I anchor on a lot of. It doesn't really matter what way we're working in, as long as we're delivering value. And a lot of places don't actually deliver value. They don't even know what it is to begin with.
Well, how many organizations have we both worked with where they say we're doing Scrum, and then if you try to inspect beyond simple metrics of like we did this sprint and we finished this much work, it's like, okay, well, what value actually came out of that? And people can't answer that question, and I think that's where I actually get most excited about working with a client that's in that space because I feel like I can make the most difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that, make the most difference, because like you're not there to just suction money out for them
Correct.
and not do a job, right? You're there to make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
What
good.
about you? So tell me how you would define that.
I define agile as optionality.
Okay.
Um, I think it's more about giving us multiple ways and methods to look at things
Mm,
and being able to key in on the things that matter most.
I
And
like
I
that.
think, I think continuous improvement goes into it. Like Kaizen, all of it is a huge part of it, but it's being able to, at its core, deliver value, just like you said.
Yeah. I think the what matters most part is, goes to the key of what we're so bad at generally is prioritization, right? So,
Ugh, yeah.
constantly trying to do so many different things. There's a lot of, if you're busy, you're important kind of feeling out there. And if we can prioritize what matters most, again, to whoever we're serving, then, and we focus on doing that the best we can, that's
Hmm.
huge.
Yeah. And I love that you said serving, right? Like that's that selfless leadership style,
Yeah.
servant leadership, whatever you want to call it. It is so important to be able to recognize that.
Yeah. I mean, I think specifically as a consultant, right? That's important because at least my goal, and I know this is true of you also, is I don't want to be there forever. I want
Yeah.
to give you the tools so that you can work in better ways and actually figure out how to adapt those ways better over the course of time. And so if I can give
Hmm.
that gift to you and leave, and you can call me a year later and say, well, I channeled you or I thought about how you would think about this problem and I was able to make things better. Huge win.
Yeah, that's the goal, is that it's not, as consultants anyway, that we're not sitting there collecting paycheck forever, right?
Right.
Like because that's not benefiting anybody. And I want to go on and solve new and different challenges.
Huge. Love the
Mm-hmm.
diversity.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a couple of topics that we were kicking around talking about today. And the first one was the experience versus certification discussion, dilemma, debate.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of D words there. And you phrased it in a really interesting way, I think, about how the Scrum Masters are providing visible value.
Yeah.
And this is like the underpinning of this entire episode is going to be about value, I think.
Yeah.
So, how are Scrum Masters providing visible value?
So, Scrum Masters to me are the secret team whisperer, right? So, if you think about a horse whisperer, right, for no better example that I can come up with. Not comparing horses to Scrum Masters, but
No, I like it.
if there's somebody who can whisper in the ear of the team and whisper in the ear of the organization. And so their work is so hard to visibly see. And it's why measurement becomes so important, because you can see, this Scrum Master started working with this team and they had this incremental value delivery, more consistent delivery, higher quality of work. They are, thinking about the value that they're delivering more often, right? So when you can visibly see a Scrum Master challenging a team, whether it's to not do something because it's not the highest priority, that's where you can visibly see the value that they're providing. It's still difficult. It's not something that's tangible that you can hold on to. It's not like saying, we created this new piece of software, because you'll get the argument all of the time, well, Scrum Masters don't write code, or Scrum Masters don't deliver marketing campaigns. But without a good Scrum Master, it could take a team multiple times longer to actually deliver that value. And so I think one of the best measures is how quickly is value getting into market from when a Scrum Master starts with a team to, say a few iterations in, we can see that progress. There's also team health. I think team health is a huge way that Scrum Masters deliver value. And that might show up differently. It might show up in them suggesting a change in team membership because they're seeing things being close to the team. It might show up in them suggesting that there's a missing specialty from the team that's holding the team back. And so one of the key behaviors or skills that a Scrum Master must have is their ability to lead without a title, right? They don't manage anybody, but they support the team and guide the team. And so those are some of the ways that I've seen Scrum Masters show up and visibly show value. What I will say is, for a large portion of my career, I managed a team of Scrum Masters and DevOps engineers. And it was part of my job every year. I had to basically justify their salaries. And that was incredibly difficult. And I had to show things like team dashboards and such so I could show progress that was being made.
That's a really good point, too, because I think a lot of managers don't know how to show and justify value for what their Scrum Masters are doing. And that's leading into this wholesale layoff of Scrum Masters, Agile coaches that we're seeing. I mean, even Capital One just laid off their entire Agile force. I mean, this was over a year ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, still those repercussions are being felt.
Deluxe did the same thing. They've actually renamed all of their Scrum Masters to technical project managers, which is not anywhere near the same role anymore. And people were given the option to stay, and many of them chose to leave because they don't want to do that technical project manager role.
Yeah, and that's another question I have, which is, are we seeing Scrum Master being folded into other roles within the organization? And I've done the development PMO role and also a project manager role, but at the same time, I'm the certified Scrum Master that's going into teams and improving them.
Right.
And doing those grassroots changes for a lot of times. That's what I did earlier in my career. But what are the titles that we're seeing Scrum Masters transition to? Like I've seen project manager high on the list.
I think if you and I looked at a project manager who had previously been a Scrum Master, we'd be able to tell right away. right? They
Mm-hmm.
behave differently than your more traditional project manager does because they're looking at things like human dynamics, which is not traditionally what a project manager is looking at, right? They're more focused on things like timelines than a scrum master is more focused on the human element, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's interesting to me, just to circle back to the certifications versus experience for a
Right.
minute, when I was in that role where I had scrum masters reporting to me, I was always asked by human resources, well, what certifications do they need to have?
Mm-hmm.
And very often, you and I have talked a lot about this, my response was, I don't care. If they have
Mm-hmm.
no certifications, but they have actually done the role well, and they can tell me how they have helped a team improve, that is worth so much more than the certification, right? So I'm not saying don't get certified. Some organizations are going to require you to have some type of certification, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of is the equivalent to getting a college degree, right? It shows that you cared enough to go and get a certification, but you've got to have the experience to back it up. And it can come
Yeah.
from many different places. It doesn't have to come from previously being a scrum master. It can come from, coaching teams within an organization where, again, you weren't their manager. And so I think those capabilities are more important than the certification itself.
Yeah, when I was I was interviewing for one particular role. They were like, "How have you used Kanban and Scrum or, Agile just in general in your life?" And I was like, "Well, every single time my husband and I moved, I have made him use a Kanban board and we're constantly updating each other. We have like informal stand-ups
Yeah.
most days, okay, who's going to take our kid to school? Like those kind of things, right? And, my interviewer, who is a good friend of mine to this day, is like, that poor man. And I was like, yes, absolutely.
This, like the remodel of this home before we moved into it, there was a Kanban board on the
Mm-hmm.
wall, and it purposefully was there because before I put the Kanban board on the wall, the general contractor was painting walls wrong colors
Yeah.
because it was too difficult to not have clear requirements, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
having the card that was like, this room gets this color with like the paint tab right on it, gave a lot of clarity also to what I wanted, but also I was able to prioritize, right? If we wanted to move into the home sooner, I could say, make sure the bathrooms are ready first before
Yeah.
this room that we're never going to use gets painted, as an example.
Right. Yeah. It's always, I pack up the kitchen last and unpack the kitchen first,
Yeah.
like even before my bedroom, because I cannot handle
Right.
having an unfurnished kitchen. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to, once again, circling back, because we've
Mm-hmm.
circled back 360 degrees at this point. But Kim and I are really bad about actually sticking to one topic. We're really passionate and
You
we
don't
jump
do a lot
all
of
over the
Zooms
place.
and
Yeah.
Zooms and Zooms.
Yeah. We squirrel quite a bit. Yeah, when people ask me, okay, the experience, do you want experience? How do I get into being a scrum master? I want to transition into tech, and that seems like an easy way to do it. The market is so saturated with people who've gotten their CSMs and they're like, great, I'm going to apply to be a scrum master. I'll make X amount of money each year. But how do you actually get the experience without having the job first? Because that's kind of the chicken and the egg situation.
Yeah. So I have two kind of unique stories of individuals I have worked with, and they'll recognize their stories when they listen to this. But one was actually a youth minister who worked in a particular denomination of Christianity, and he took that experience, leveraged that into being an executive admin for our team, and then took that experience where we actually relied on him quite a bit as kind of therapist for our leadership team at one point. And then he was able to get a part-time Scrum Master role and then leverage that into a full-time Scrum Master role. And so
That's
that
awesome.
was a kind of unique way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you from the first day that I met him when he was our executive admin, I knew he could be a great Scrum Master. You can just tell from some of those capabilities. The other was somebody who was a school teacher. And so she started as a school teacher, then she ran programs for a school. So whether that was aftercare programs or things where you needed to be able to pivot frequently, right? So I think one of the keys is if you've been in a role where you had to pivot frequently, you're probably going to be a pretty good Scrum Master, right? Because that's kind of one of the core behaviors of being a good Agilist is being able to inspect and adapt. And so she took her ability to do that. She had an interest in Agile. She got certified, and to this day, she's a great, coach.
Yeah. And I really like the certifications from the aspect of it gives a really good baseline of what you're going to be coaching on.
Yep.
Because, and like you said, a teacher, that's a great jump, right? Because like you're training, you're coaching, you're mentoring, you're guiding in general, all of these practices you want to see happen in the team.
Yeah. And you have multiple constituencies you're serving, right? Because you have students, you have their parents as a constituency, you have the administration that you're serving, right? So you get used to serving multiple people at any given time.
Yeah. And being able to prioritize those stakeholders' needs.
Yes.
Right.
In case the students come first.
Yeah, exactly. And we could dive into Lencioni's first team concept, but we won't do that in this call or in this particular session. I think that's
too much.
Yeah. And going back to like what you said at the very beginning of providing visible value. So I remember I was interviewing for some kind of consulting gig. And I think I had started my first LLC and was like, that was the first one. I was really proud of it. I did not know what I was doing. And I interviewed with somebody. Yay. And I interviewed somebody and they said, well, how are you proving, like, what metrics are you tracking for yourself to see that you're effective? And it like blew my mind because I was like, I have metrics? Because I was so focused on being part of the team that I didn't take into account that I would need metrics to show what I was working on. And so, like you said, the metrics around how is that team getting value to market? How are you increasing their throughput? How are you looking at reducing cycle time, WIP, those kind of things that we know lead to a increase in market delivery, right? And one thing that I also look at a lot is what's the work, and it's really hard to track, but what's the amount of work that is not done and how do you maximize that? That one is hard.
If you can like delete things from your backlog, and it's so hard for people to do because it's like folks who have storage facilities, right? And I don't know if you have a storage facility, but if you're holding on to things and you're holding on to your backlog, it's almost like the same concept, right? If you don't think you're going to do it, or it's not something that's going to now provide value and it's been in your backlog for 2-3 years, delete that thing.
Yeah. When my husband got out of the Army, they move your stuff, like they do one final move, right? And they move it to wherever you want. But he was like living with me in my 1-bedroom apartment. And so we had nowhere for his 1-bedroom apartment of stuff to come into my 1-bedroom apartment. So he got a storage facility and he had it until we were like having our first baby years later. And I was like, this is too much. You got to get rid of that. It's not even in the same state.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah. Talk about some debt right there.
Oh yeah. huge debt.
Yeah. So talking about visible value, certifications versus experience, what are, let's say, 3 takeaways you would give for this conversation?
So there's a measurement that I think is not quantitative, but is certainly qualitative, that I think is an important one and I would consider as a takeaway, which is if you can stop going to your team's stand up as a Scrum Master or not show up and it still runs well and the board still gets updated and there's still adaptive conversations happening, that is a big takeaway to me. So I would say look for things like that. Look for places where the team doesn't need you, because that's the greatest success of a Scrum Master. It sounds weird, you're working yourself out of a job, right? But it's a key indicator. I think I would apply the next one to both university and being a Scrum Master and getting certified. Do some of the work first and then get certified. Because if you have been supporting an Agile team in some way, even if it's not as a Scrum Master, even if it's in another role, and then you go to your 2-day course, you'll ask better questions, you'll find deeper meaning in the learnings. And so to me, that would be a second kind of takeaway. Do some of the work first, then get certified. So in that order.
Mm-hmm.
Third to me would be a business analyst. And to me, that means you're not just the facilitator of the team as a Scrum Master. You have to help the team deliver a higher level of value. And the greatest way to do that is by understanding the problems that are trying to be solved and helping the team solve them even better than they did. That might be by helping them to ask questions that they wouldn't have asked, or asking those questions yourself. But be a business analyst, not just a Scrum Master.
I like that. I think my 3, this is going to be a little bit difficult to not give the same 3 that you did, right? I think focus on being a guide and establishing value. So how are you guiding them through that value creation process, and not only creation, right, but value delivery? So I think I've heard it described before as, like maybe even a value midwife. You can think about it that way, right?
I like that.
Yeah. So maybe they'll just start calling Scrum Masters value midwives. That would be very strange, but I love it.
Started here, folks.
And the other thing is keep a good vibes folder or some kind of way to track what you're doing. Because just like you're talking about the qualitative versus quantitative, that goes into your overall storytelling as you're going for your next job or your next promotion or your next endeavor, whatever it may be. That helps you craft those stories. And those are really, really important.
I think you also need that to get through the hard days, right?
Hell yeah.
So, like someplace to look back and say, oh, here was a good moment because today was a tough, like I did 3 sprint planning sessions or whatever happened that day.
Yeah. And that's the other part is like, just know there's going to be good days and bad days, right? And they all kind of even out, the idea is that the trend line is going up.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Love them.
Well, thanks for coming for this inaugural discussion. Hopefully we can do a lot more of these.
Can't wait to share more.
Yeah. We'll see you on the next one.